is I don't want to waste any time.
No.
So let's not.
No.
River Islands guest line, NFL Films, executive producer Greg Cosell, every week, right here on Willard and Dibs, the absolute best football breakdown in the world. And then at the very end, we see if we can twist his arm and make him pick the game. And he never wants to, but then he always does. And I don't even remember. Who did you pick last week between the Niners and Eagles? You wouldn't, huh? Yeah, you refused.
Yeah.
You should have picked the Niners, Greg.
I'm sure the game played out exactly the way you thought, didn't it?
Without a doubt.
Had it the whole time, Greg.
Exactly. For sure. Yep.
All right, so then let's dive into this because a lot of Niner fans are now willing to sort of suspend reality because of what happened last week. But a week and a half ago, this matchup was very, very challenging for them, and that was at home, and George Kittle played in it. So are there any, do you see any spots on film that the Niners can attack better than what they did in that game?
Well, that was one of those games where they were physically handled. And I thought that was more the case than just the schematics of it. I thought they were physically handled. Now, it's hard to know whether something like that would happen again or not. You would think not. Which, again, having said that, that doesn't mean that they're going to win the game or they're going to score, 25 points or whatever. But they really had a hard time on both lines. That was a game where the Seahawks controlled the ball for almost 38 minutes. Charbonnet and Walker combined for 33 for 171, and the Seahawks have not been a great running team this year. So that was a game where they just dominated. They were able to get to the edges in the run game, which was a big problem in that game. That is more of a tactical thing that can be corrected. But overall, I thought on both sides of the ball that they were just physically handled. And normally when that happens, guys, it doesn't happen again in a short period of time. But, I'm certainly not making a prediction, but normally it doesn't happen again like that.
Especially when you get Big 71 back as your left tackle. And I was looking at my notes, Greg, in anticipation of your tremendous appearance. They had 3 first downs in the first half. And you get Trent back. How much does that help you to at least maybe try to get some of that outside zone going?
Well, it expands your run game because obviously without Trent Williams, there are certain things I'm sure that Kyle Shanahan is not comfortable calling, particularly against a defense the caliber of the Seahawks. I mean, that was a game, guys, where they ran 42 offensive plays in the entire game. I mean, that is unheard of in an NFL game. I can't think back, obviously, to every game in the Kyle Shanahan era, but I would bet that 42 offensive plays would be really close, if not the fewest offensive snaps that a Kyle Shanahan offense has run. Now, there's multiple reasons for that. Some have to do with the way their defense played, but 42 snaps is not going to get it done because one thing about Kyle Shanahan, which I think is one reason he's so good, is he's a full game offensive coach. In other words, he's not just looking for the one big play where he says, oh, this is a cool play, let's run this. Now, that happens every once in a while. Obviously, it happened against Philly, which was the same play they ran against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Sometimes you pull one of those out of you-know-where because the game feels like that, but that's not foundationally how he plays. He plays to sort of work through a game and see how a defense reacts to what he does. And when you only run 42 plays, it's very, very hard to do that.
Greg Cosell, NFL Films. Before we go further and deeper into the Seattle matchup, can we unpack a little bit what happened against Philadelphia? And specifically maybe one that will come into play next week, but I would love to know what you saw on tape after George Kittle left. What did they do with Juszczyk and Tonges to try to kind of make up for that?
My sense was, and I was looking at Juszczyk pretty specifically, they did a lot of the same things that they normally do with Juszczyk. There might have been a few snaps where he was split outside, and maybe he wouldn't have been if Kittle was there. That's something you'll never know. that's one of those cause and effect things, because if you see him do something that's maybe slightly different, the automatic assumption is, well, they're doing it because Kittle's not there. You don't really know the answer to that question, obviously. But I didn't think that they did anything dramatically different with Juszczyk based on what they normally do. As far as the tight ends, look, I thought that the touchdown that turned out to be the winning touchdown in the game, which was the McCaffrey 4-yard touchdown reception. McCaffrey was obviously not the primary receiver on that play. You could make the argument that play was put in and it was with Kittle in mind, because the tight end, I think it was Tonges on that play, he ran a route across the back of the end zone. And I think that was, even if he wasn't the primary, I think there was a sense that could be the throw with that route concept. Again, I think the issue with Kittle being out could be more of a factor in the run game than the pass game. And obviously, even though Kittle's a really good receiver, I don't think that Kyle Shanahan is going to pull back the concepts that he runs in the pass game, because you're playing against a really good defense. You can't go into this game with the idea that we're going to limit what we do on offense. And he has a week to figure all this out. So it's not as if, this just happened and now he's got to try to figure out in the middle of a game.
Looking at McCaffrey on the game-winning touchdown, he comes out late and he sees the coverage is kind of shading him toward the boundary side. What did you see from Purdy and McCaffrey on that play that kind of bodes well for the Niners going forward?
Well, it wasn't what McCaffrey saw. That was the play design. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they were trying to get done. I mean, you're dealing with a specific concept. So if you look at the play, you'll notice that when Purdy takes the snap, he is looking to his right. McCaffrey was not the primary receiver. They were running a route concept to the right side. Bourne goes in motion. Everything works to the right, and it's actually Tonges who is the receiver. They're working, in a sense, kind of what we call a smash concept. They're just getting to it in a different way. I think ultimately what he's looking for is Tonges on the crosser behind Robinson and Jennings. And he doesn't feel like that's there. And plus, he does get pressure because, believe it or not, Williams sort of got beat by Smith on this play. And so Purdy had to move. And then when he moved, he looked back the other way because he had to move. And McCaffrey worked through the line of scrimmage on his route. And then he just worked back inside, kind of a pivot route back inside, which had all been cleared out. So McCaffrey was not the primary receiver on this play. Again, without knowing 100%, I think ultimately Tonges was the primary receiver, but he wasn't able to get to that because of the pressure. So he had to move.
Greg, I wish everybody, because there are many, but a lot of people are listening to this on radio, I wish everybody could be on YouTube and watch you do that answer while also leaning back in your chair and then looking up at the video replay of what you're talking about. What do you have in there? How many screens? You got a little clicker that makes things stop and go.
Well,
what do you got?
I've got one screen, but I have a clicker, obviously. So you can, having a clicker makes a lot of people think, and I try not to fall into this category, guys, just so you know, having a clicker makes people think that they're really smarter than they are and they know more. And I try not to fall into that category because all this stuff happens really, really fast. So when I use my clicker, I'm thinking more in terms of schematics and tactics and not, oh, he should have done this. Look at that. He should have thrown it there. I try not to get caught up in that because you'd have to know how guys are coached. You have to know what they're asked to do. When I watch plays over and over, I'm thinking more in terms of the tactics and the schematics.
Greg, I don't think it makes you smarter, even though you are very smart. I just think it makes you fancy.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Yeah. If that's a compliment, I appreciate it.
It is. You got a fancy setup over there, but at NFL Films,
the thing is, I learned this a long time ago from, I think it might have been Ron Jaworski, who I worked with for years and years. And he said something to me, this goes back forever. And, he said something that's always resonated. He said, everybody's a genius when they have access to the results. And I try not to think of things that way. I try to think about the process because, it's easy when you see something either good or bad to decide exactly, like I said, then you know what happened and you can easily comment on it. That's easy. I try not to fall into that.
Greg, I don't know if Ricky Pearsall is playing, but it certainly feels like it's trending in that direction. Right. And I can tell you that a big narrative around these parts after the last Seattle game was that the Niner receivers had a very hard time with separation, and Ricky would have helped that. Do you agree? How would that change the Niners wide receiver structure in your mind?
Well, I think that Ricky Pearsall is their best receiver in terms of winning one-on-one. So I think that that's a big deal. Anytime you have a receiver that can win one-on-one, that's important. And, it's obviously a very schemed offense. There were some plays in the game against Philly, quite frankly, that I was surprised that I don't want to say Philly let happen. They didn't let anything happen. But I mean that long completion to Jennings, which was just your classic Purdy to Jennings in-breaking route play. In some ways, I didn't expect to see that against a Vic Fangio defense because they run that all the time. It was just, I think Tom Brady even said during the telecast that was an A-plus throw, and it was an A-plus throw. And that's what the 49ers are in the pass game, and that's what Purdy is when he's playing well. But when you have a receiver that can win one-on-one, there's always times in a game when that's necessary. And I think having Ricky Pearsall back, and again, I'm not sitting here saying he's going to go 6 for 120. I'm just saying that he adds a dimension to their offense and their pass game that if you don't have, just makes it more difficult against a very good defense.
The Niners played a mostly clean game, just one penalty against Philly. They did have the 2 interceptions. When you look at those plays, and I'm not asking you to lean back and swivel, although the YouTube audience would love to watch you watching it. What did you make of those throws, and how much was the wind a factor?
That's why it didn't look like a big factor at all, to be honest with you. But again, I'm not on the field throwing the ball, so I really can't answer that question. I remember the second interception really well, and that was tough because I think he was throwing it to Tonges, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And the way that defense played out, it was Mitchell who ended up playing him, and you're throwing a crossing route to a receiver versus a DB who's faster. So it's just hard. That's a tough deal. I understood why he made the throw, but I think that's just a hard throw. The second one, the first one, now I remember the first one. The first one was a case where they got exactly what they wanted, okay? Because they got the inbreaker, I believe, off run action, if I'm not mistaken. They got the inbreaker off run action, and it was Jennings who was wide open on the throw. But I think what happened, and again, I'm not in Purdy's head, but there was inside pressure, and I think it was by Jordan Davis who shoved back maybe Brendel, if memory serves me correctly, who shoved him right back into the pocket. And my guess is, without knowing for sure, that Purdy just did not feel comfortable turning it loose, that it just squeezed him so much that he didn't feel like he could make the throw. And so then he came to a secondary receiver and he was late, and it just obviously turned out poorly. But in terms of the concept of the play, they got exactly what they wanted.
Greg Cosell, NFL Films, with us. Let's talk Sam Darnold a little bit. I know what a fan will say. Oh, the big moments at the end of the year, he's seeing ghosts and it doesn't go well for him. But I wonder what your breakdown actually of him, specifically with the Seahawks this year,
right,
and kind of what he does well, where he struggles. Is the 49er defense equipped to do something about it?
Well, the key thing with Darnold is you have to be able to speed up his process and get pressure on him. And as you guys know, that has certainly been an issue for the 49ers. They weren't able even to get pressure on Jalen Hurts last week, even though they won the game. I think I don't know if they have the fewest sacks in the league, but they're certainly at the bottom or close to the bottom. They don't really put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. Darnold, when he's clean, and I know you could say that about a lot of guys. It's like saying anybody can catch the good hops in baseball. But the point is, when he's clean, He's very, very efficient, and he can make every throw within the context of what they ask him to do. They work the middle of the field really well. He works outside the numbers really well. He throws a beautiful ball. He's big. He's physical. There's a presence about him in the pocket. But if you can speed him up, his mental process seems not to work quite as well, and then he makes throws that ideally he shouldn't make. So the big question is, can they do that? It's very difficult. I thought Darnold, even though the numbers weren't anywhere near his best of the season, guys, I thought against the Niners in that Week 18 game, he played one of his best games of the year, given the nature of that game. The key, and you'll hear someone like Tom Brady, who I think is tremendous doing games, by the way. You learn something every time he does a game. I think that, he always talks about playing the game the way that game plays out, which doesn't mean you have to, go 30 for 40 for 380 yards. And I thought in that Week 18 game, given the low-scoring nature of the game, given the way the Seahawks were controlling both lines and controlling the ball, as I said, for close to 38 minutes, I thought he played that game really efficiently. And, maybe this game plays out differently. Maybe the Niners are able to get some points on the board. Maybe they're able to go up 14-6, and all of a sudden the game's different. But I think Darnold, for the most part, and I know everybody worries about the turnovers, and maybe there are some out there that are just saying, oh, we're just waiting for the game where Darnold turns it over and becomes Sam Darnold. I know there's always going to be people like that, but for the most part, he's played well this year. Sure, does he at times have a propensity to turn it over? And there's reasons for that. But if he's clean, he's going to make throws.
Niners are dead last in sacks with 20 in the regular season, Greg. And
right.
They don't pressure the quarterback often. They don't blitz often either. But when they do blitz, how susceptible is Darnold to some of the things we've seen lately from Saleh, which is, show 8 at the line and then drop a couple, kind of that zone blitz concept?
Well, yeah. I mean, with Darnold and with the offense in general, because it's not only the quarterback, what you're trying to do is create some kind of hesitation in pass protection or some kind of way to break down the protection, because pretty much every defensive coordinator knows how an offense will pass protect based on how they line up their front. I mean, this is what guys do. I mean, I can watch tape, and I do this on the matchup show all the time, where I do defensive pressure pieces, and how an offense is protecting, and how a defense is going to break down that protection, and sometimes they get a free hitter, or sometimes they get the one-on-one matchup that they feel very good about. Maybe it's a blitzing linebacker on a back. So everybody knows how offenses protect. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to break down that protection. Now, the question is, with the Niners, do they have an individual on their defensive front who can win one-on-one if they can get a good matchup? That remains to be seen, guys, and I think you would agree with that.
Yeah.
So the question is, then the other part of that is, can you create a situation where maybe you're dropping people out that Sam Darnold doesn't expect to be dropping out? What they call rack defenders very often. You drop them out in underneath coverage, and maybe he doesn't anticipate that, and he throws the ball right to, maybe it's a D tackle, maybe it's a linebacker that was up on the ball, and then he drops out. That's what you're hoping to do, to cause that situation where, he throws the ball, and it's like, oh, I didn't expect that guy to be there. That's the other element of pressure that is not a function of sacking him or hitting him.
Greg, let's talk about the Niner linebacking core. And I know this is a small sample, but what did you see last week from Eric Kendricks and Garrett Wallo, and how it compares to what D. Winters and Tatum Bethune were doing?
Well, I'm not going to compare. I'm going to say both those guys I thought played well. I thought that they were aggressive. I thought they saw things well. Again, it's hard to make an exact comparison. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, there was no drop off, or they played well. Don't forget, these guys, they haven't played. I mean, Kendricks, what did he just get there a couple of weeks ago?
Yep.
And Wallo, I don't know, because I don't watch special teams. I don't know if he's been there all year, but I thought he played well too.
Not. Yeah, he was with the Broncos earlier this year.
The other player I thought played really well was Siegel, when he had to come in for Brown, and he's going to play this week because Brown's not going to play. And don't forget, he played. He was a starter early in the season. I don't know what happened, as to why. Maybe they just felt once Mustafa came back that Mustafa and Brown were the two better safeties. But I thought Siegel flashed throughout the game with his aggressiveness, especially in the run game. I thought, yeah, he showed great range. I thought he really showed up on tape.
How big of an advantage is it for the 49ers with the bend but don't break defense inside the red zone against Seattle, where they're 22nd in red zone percentage? They don't seem to do that well when you get especially in the lower red zone.
Yeah, and one of those reasons is, I know Charbonnet has been Seattle's guy as far as running the ball in the low red zone, but between the 10 and the 20, it's a little different factor. That's the high red zone, as we call it. That's where normally the pass game has to become a bigger factor. And we'll see. I believe their tight end Arroyo is supposed to be back this week, if what I read is correct. I think he's. Now, he hasn't played and he's a rookie, so I don't know what that means, but he's a guy that has more juice than any of their other tight ends. So does he become a factor situationally? Obviously, he's not going to play 60 snaps, but maybe he's a factor situationally. So we'll find out. But yeah, Seattle's not a great, sort of high red zone offense. They weren't good in the red zone against the Niners in the Week 18 game. So we'll see. To me, much of this comes down, guys, to the Niners' ability on offense to control the pace and tempo. Now, does that mean score 30 points? It doesn't necessarily have to mean that, but they're an offense that is a four-quarter offense. They need to run plays, and obviously that did not happen Week 18. And you almost felt that, or I did anyway. I don't know what you guys felt. I felt that watching on TV that the game was getting away from them early in terms of how the game was being played. Yeah, you could sit there and say that, oh, gee, they were still in the game because of the score, but it never felt like 49er football. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they were dominated in that game. Yeah, it was. Yeah. They were behind it the whole time.
Yeah, they again, and it wasn't even the score as much as just, like I said, the way the game was being played.
Yep.
So to me, they've got, and I don't want to sound stupidly cliched because this stuff's always easy to say, but I think their run game, they don't need to rush for 150 yards, but there needs to be somewhat of a sustaining element, to the point where, Kyle can build off his plays as opposed to being caught in third and longs where your playbook is really shrunk.
Greg, I've listened to every single word that you've said, and it sounds to me like you're saying Niners by 4.
I thought I was saying Niners by 40.
Oh,
yeah, of course.
There, lock that in.
Yep.
Cosell says, yeah, Niners in a blowout. Greg, that was a great way to finish. Thank you so much.
Well, I love you guys. I love talking with you guys every week. Thanks so much.
All right, Greg.
We feel the same. All right, there he goes. Greg Cosell, NFL Film.